Security guard teaches self-defense to night workers, unaware he's training an Olympic gold medalist. The thought echoed in Marcus's head as he taped his knuckles, each rap a ritual against the memories that haunted him. 3 years since the incident, and still the nightmares came. Still the phantom pain shot through his left knee whenever rain threatened. The community center's basement lights flickered overhead, casting shadows across the worn mats he'd salvaged from a gym closure last spring. Tuesday night, 11 p.m. His students would arrive soon. The hospital graveyard shift nurses, the 24-hour diner waitresses, the gas station attendants. Night workers who traversed empty parking lots and deserted streets when most of the city slept. Marcus checked his watch, an old habit from his military days. 15 minutes to prepare mentally. 15 minutes to transform from the limping security guard who patrolled empty office buildings to the man who once moved like lightning. "You've got this," he whispered, stretching his damaged leg. The knee protested, sending sharp splinters of pain up his thigh. Some days were worse than others. Today was bad. The doctors had warned him, no more competitive fighting, no more dreams of returning to the circuit, but teaching that they couldn't take from him. The basement door creaked open, and Eliza appeared. Her hospital scrubs exchanged for leggings and a loose t-shirt. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but she smiled. The small, hesitant smile she'd worn since the night she'd been attacked in the hospital parking garage 3 months ago. "Am I early?" Her voice was soft, barely audible over the building's ancient heating system. Marcus shook his head. "Right on time. Want to help set up the partner drills?" She nodded, dropping her bag in the corner, where the others would soon pile theirs. 5 regulars now, all women, all working hours that made them vulnerable, all with stories they rarely shared, but that Marcus could read in their cautious movements, their startled reactions to sudden noises, their determination to never be victims again. The door opened again. Tyrell and Shauna, the convenience store couple who'd started coming after a robbery last winter. Then May, the quiet night shift pharmacist. And finally Danny, slipping in just as Marcus was about to begin. "Sorry," she murmured, hurrying to join the circle. "Bus was late." Marcus nodded, studying her as she took her place. Newest to the group, only 2 sessions so far. There was something different about Danny. Something in the way she held herself, the efficient economy of her movements. Even when she was attempting to look uncoordinated during drills, her balance was perfect. Too perfect for someone who claimed to have no training. "Tonight," Marcus began, "we're focusing on close-quarter defense. Situations where you're cornered, where you don't have space to run." His knee twinged as he demonstrated the stance. "Sometimes all you have is inches. But inches can be enough if you know how to use them." He caught Danny watching him intently, her eyes tracking his hands with unusual focus. When he paired them off for practice, he deliberately chose her as his partner. "I'll go easy on you," she said with a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Appreciate that," Marcus replied, matching her light tone while studying her stance. The way she shifted her weight was textbook perfect. Not the awkward positioning of a beginner, but don't hold back on my account. For 40 minutes, he guided the group through escape techniques. Eliza's movements were becoming more confident. Tyrell and Shauna worked with the synchronicity of people who knew each other's rhythms. May, though tiny, had developed a fierce determination. And Danny moved like water, even when she was obviously restraining herself. "Where did you say you work?" Marcus asked casually as they reset for another drill. "Hospital cafeteria. Overnight prep cook." She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Not very exciting." Marcus demonstrated the next move, a simple wrist escape. "Like this." When someone grabs you, Danny executed the move flawlessly on her first try, her hands a blur. The reaction was so fast, so precise, that Marcus nearly missed his counter. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition. "Lucky guess," she said quickly. Marcus nodded, saying nothing, but watched her more carefully for the remainder of the session. The way she pulled her punches, the calluses on her knuckles that didn't come from kitchen work, the perfect footwork she tried to make appear clumsy. As the class ended and the others gathered their belongings, trading quiet conversation about shifts and schedules, Marcus approached Danny. "Can you stay a few minutes?" he asked quietly. Wariness flickered across her face. "I should catch the midnight bus." "Just 5 minutes, please." After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. They waited in awkward silence as the others filed out, Eliza giving a curious backward glance before the door closed behind her. "You're not a beginner," Marcus said simply. Danny's shoulders tensed. "I don't know what your form is perfect. Your reflexes are trained. The way you pull your strikes." He shook his head. "I'm not upset. I'm just curious why an experienced fighter is pretending to be a novice in a community center self-defense class." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of the heating system. Finally, Danny sighed, her posture shifting subtly. Suddenly, she looked different, confident, centered, powerful. "I needed somewhere to train where no one knew me," she said. "Somewhere quiet." "Why the secrecy?" She glanced toward the door, as if ensuring they were truly alone. "Because when people know who you are, they treat you differently. They want things from you. They stop seeing you as a person." Marcus felt a twinge of recognition. "And who are you exactly?" Danny hesitated, then met his gaze directly. "Danielle Chen, but most people know me as the Dragon." Marcus finished, recognition finally clicking into place. Olympic gold medalist, 3-time world champion in judo. A sad smile touched her lips. Former champion. "I'm retired now." Marcus's mind raced, memories of watching her matches years ago, before his own injury. The way she dominated the mat, her technique flawless, her opponents outmatched before they even began. "What are you doing working in a hospital cafeteria in this neighborhood?" "Hiding," she answered simply. "Or maybe finding myself again. I'm not sure which." The honesty in her voice resonated with something deep inside Marcus. He understood hiding. He understood loss of identity. "Your knee," she said suddenly. "That's why you're teaching instead of competing." "A CL?" "A CL, MCL, and a shattered patella." He smiled grimly. "ID in Afghanistan, then a bad fall during physical therapy that finished the job." "You noticed?" "I notice everything about how people move." "Occupational hazard." She gestured to his stance. "You compensate well, but you're in pain tonight. Some days are worse than others," he admitted. "I could show you some techniques. For the pain management." She paused. "If you'll keep my secret." Marcus considered her offer, understanding suddenly flowing between them. Two warriors, both adrift, both hiding from what they'd lost. "I'll keep your secret," he said, "if you'll stop pretending in class. These women, they deserve to learn from the best." Danny's expression softened. "And they have been." "You're good, Marcus. Better than you give yourself credit for." Something warm unfurled in his chest at her words. The first genuine praise he'd received since his injury. Not pity, not condescension, but recognition from someone who truly understood. "Same time Thursday?" he asked. She nodded, gathering her bag. At the door, she paused. "For what it's worth, I'm not just here because I needed a place to train. What you're doing for these women, it matters." After she left, Marcus sat alone on the mat, massaging his aching knee, thinking about second chances and unexpected connections. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of something he'd thought long extinguished. Hope. Winter deepened, and with it, the night classes took on a new energy. Marcus never revealed Danny's identity to the others, but her role shifted. Sometimes she demonstrated techniques alongside him, her movements precise and powerful. The other women noticed the change but asked no questions, seeming to understand instinctively that some secrets were meant to be kept. On Thursdays, after everyone left, Danny stayed. She showed Marcus techniques for managing his pain, stretches, pressure points, ways of moving that put less strain on his damaged knee. In return, he shared what he knew about teaching, about reaching people who came to self-defense not from a place of ambition, but from fear. "You were trained to win medals," he explained one night as they reset the mats. "They're training to survive. It's a different mindset." Danny nodded, absorbing his words. "In competition, everything is controlled. Referees, rules, time limits." She paused, her eyes distant. "Nothing like the real world." Something in her tone made Marcus look up. "You sound like you know the difference firsthand." She was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. 3 years ago, after Beijing, I was attacked leaving a celebration. 3 men, drunk, angry that I'd beaten their country's champion. The air seemed to thicken between them. Marcus remained still, sensing she needed to speak without interruption. "I won the fight," she continued, "but it wasn't like the mat. It was ugly and terrifying, and..." She took a shaky breath. "I broke one man's arm in 3 places. Another will never walk properly again. The press called it justified self-defense, but all I could think was that I'd become the thing I was fighting against. Violence for the sake of violence. That's why you retired," Marcus said softly. "Not injury, not age." Danny nodded. "I couldn't step onto the mat again without remembering. Without feeling that same rage and fear, she met his eyes. How do you teach them to defend themselves without teaching them to hate? To fear? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Marcus thought of his own journey, the nightmares that followed him home from war, the anger that had nearly consumed him during his recovery. We don't teach them just techniques, he said finally. We teach them to recognize their own worth, to believe they deserve to go home safely at the end of their shifts. He flexed his damaged knee. Fear and anger only take you so far. Beyond that, you need something more sustainable. Like what? Her question wasn't challenging, but genuinely seeking. Self-respect, community, purpose. He gestured to the space around them. Look at Eliza. 3 months ago, she could barely make eye contact. Now she helps the new people feel welcome. That's not because she can throw a proper punch. It's because she's found her place in something larger than her fear. Danny absorbed his words, her expression thoughtful. You're a good teacher, Marcus. So are you. When you're not pretending to be less than you are. A small smile touched her lips. Touché. As winter melted into spring, their post-class sessions evolved. Sometimes they trained, Danny pushing Marcus to reclaim movements his doctors had told him were impossible. Other times they simply talked about the weight of expectations, about life after dreams died, about starting over. The night workers continued to come. Eliza, Tyrell, Shauna, May. New faces joined. Jerome from the all-night diner, Sarah from dispatch, others who heard through word of mouth about the security guard teaching self-defense in the basement of the community center. What none of them knew was how Marcus waited for Tuesdays and Thursdays with an anticipation that had been absent from his life for years. How he found himself planning lessons with Danny in mind, wanting to see that rare smile when he demonstrated something unexpected. How her quiet strength had become a cornerstone in the rebuilding of his own. And what Marcus didn't know was how Danny had stopped taking extra shifts at the hospital, arranging her schedule around class nights. How she'd begun cooking again, not just for work but for pleasure, sometimes bringing containers of food that she casually left in the community center refrigerator with notes like, "For anyone who's hungry," but that were filled with dishes she'd noticed Marcus enjoying. Spring brought longer days and shorter nights, but the night workers still came, their routines unchanged by the shifting seasons. And in the fluorescent-lit basement, something continued to grow between the security guard with the damaged knee and the Olympic champion in hiding, something neither was ready to name, but both had begun to depend on. Then came the night everything changed. Marcus arrived early, as always, to set up the mats and prepare the space. His knee felt better than it had in months. Danny's techniques, combined with his stubborn determination, were yielding results his doctors had deemed impossible. He could demonstrate movements now without the searing pain that had once been his constant companion. The door opened, and Marcus looked up, expecting to see Eliza, always the first to arrive. Instead, a man he didn't recognize stepped into the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the unmistakable swagger of someone used to intimidating others. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, instantly alert. "I'm looking for Danielle Chen." The man's voice was smooth, professional. "I was told she might be here." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "There's no one by that name in this class. This is a self-defense group for night shift workers." The man smiled thinly, reaching into his jacket to produce a business card. "Jason Reynolds, Sports Management. Ms. Chen has been difficult to reach through conventional channels." "Like I said, there's no Danielle Chen here." Marcus didn't take the card. "The class starts in 20 minutes. Unless you work nights and want to learn self-defense, I'll have to ask you to leave." Something hardened in Reynolds' expression. "Look, I know she's been coming here. 3 different people confirmed it. I'm not trying to cause trouble. There's a major exhibition tournament in 3 weeks. Sponsors, television coverage, significant appearance fees. The Dragon's return would be the headline event." "The Dragon retired," Marcus said evenly. "Seems like that should be respected." Reynolds laughed shortly. "Nobody retires at 28. Not when they're still at their peak. Not when there's money on the table." He looked around the Spartan basement with undisguised contempt. "Whatever game she's playing down here with you people, it's time she got back to reality." The door opened again, and this time it was Eliza who entered, stopping uncertainly when she sensed the tension. "Everything okay, Marcus?" she asked, her hand instinctively tightening on her bag. "Everything's fine. Mr. Reynolds was just leaving." Marcus held the man's gaze steadily. Reynolds shrugged, placing his card on the edge of a folding chair. "Tell her to call me before the offer expires." He nodded to Eliza with practiced charm and left, the door closing firmly behind him. Eliza looked questioningly at Marcus. What was that about? Nothing important, Marcus answered, his mind racing. Just someone looking for publicity for his tournament. They began setting up as the others arrived, but Marcus found himself watching the door, tension coiling in his stomach. When Danny finally arrived, just minutes before class was set to begin, the relief he felt was immediately tempered by concern. How had Reynolds found her? What would this mean? The class proceeded normally, but Marcus could sense Danny's distraction. She moved through the drills mechanically, her usual fluid grace replaced by a stiff precision that told him her mind was elsewhere. When everyone had gone and they were alone, he handed her Reynolds' card without comment. He was here, she said flatly. Not a question. Marcus nodded. Looking for the dragon. Danny closed her eyes briefly, then crumpled the card in her fist. I knew it wouldn't last forever. The anonymity. What will you do? She shrugged, but the casualness of the gesture was belied by the tension in her shoulders. Ignore him, like I've ignored the others. Others? This isn't the first offer. Just the first one that found me in person. She looked around the basement, her expression unreadable. I should go. I've put you and the others in an awkward position. Marcus felt a flare of something dangerously close to panic at the thought of her disappearing. Running won't solve anything. They'll just find you somewhere else. Then what do you suggest? There was an edge to her voice he hadn't heard before. Go back? Put on the show? Be the dragon again for the cameras and the sponsors and the fans who don't care about anything except whether I win or lose? I don't know, Marcus admitted. But I know that hiding here, pretending to be someone you're not, that's not a solution either. Isn't it? She challenged. Isn't that exactly what you're doing too? Hiding from what you were, pretending this is enough? Her words struck with the precision of a well-aimed blow. Marcus stepped back, physically rocked by the truth in them. You're right, he said quietly. We're both hiding, both stuck. He gestured to the space around them. But at least here, we're doing something that matters. These people, they need what we're teaching them. And what about what we need? Danny's voice had softened, vulnerability showing through the cracks in her armor. I'm tired of defining myself by what I can or can't do on a mat, Marcus. Tired of being the dragon instead of just me. Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition, a sharing of truth that neither had fully articulated before. Then don't go back for them, Marcus said. But don't run away from this either. He gestured between them. Whatever this is. The air seemed to still around them as the words hung in the space between their bodies. Danny's eyes widened slightly, a flush spreading across her cheeks. And what is this, exactly? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus took a step toward her, his heart hammering against his ribs. I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. For a moment, neither moved. Then Danny closed the distance between them, her hand reaching up to touch his face with a gentleness that belied her strength. When their lips met, it wasn't with the hesitation of a first kiss, but with the certainty of something long-awaited finally arriving. When they broke apart, Danny rested her forehead against his. I don't know what happens next, she admitted. Marcus smiled. Neither do I, but I think that's okay. As they left the community center that night, walking close but not quite touching, both sensed they had crossed a threshold from which there was no returning. Whatever came next, Reynolds' tournament offers, the truth eventually emerging about the dragon teaching self-defense in a basement, the uncertain future of two people who had each lost their way, they would face it not as separate individuals hiding from their past, but as something new, something still forming but undeniably real. Above them, the stars pierced through the city's light pollution, distant but steady. And for the first time in years, neither Marcus nor Danny felt the need to look over their shoulder at what they'd left behind. Instead, they walked forward into the possibility of what might be. The revelation, when it came, wasn't planned. 3 weeks after Reynolds' visit, during a Tuesday night class that had grown to 15 regular attendees, the basement door opened mid-session. A group of teenagers peered in, 5 boys with the unmistakable swagger of those trying to appear tougher than they felt. "We looking for the dragon," announced their apparent leader, a lanky youth with elaborate tattoos crawling up his neck. His eyes scanned the room, dismissing the night workers before settling on Danny with sudden recognition. "Yo, it is you!" The class fell silent, all eyes turning to Danny, who had frozen in mid-demonstration with Eliza. "Class is closed," Marcus said firmly. "Private sessions." "Nah, man, we just want to see the dragon do her thing." The boy pulled out his phone. "Can we get a pic?" Nobody believes she's really teaching in some basement. Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself between the teenagers and Danny. I said the class is closed. The atmosphere shifted, tension crackling through the room. The teenager's expressions hardened, embarrassment transforming quickly to anger. Who the hell are you to tell us what to do? Demanded the leader, taking a step forward. We just want to talk to the dragon. My name, Danny said clearly from behind Marcus, is Danielle, and this is a private class. Her voice carried the quiet authority that had once commanded respect in international arenas. She moved to stand beside Marcus, her presence radiating a calm that seemed to fill the space. But if you're interested in learning, you're welcome to come to the Thursday beginner session, she continued. 7 p.m. No phones allowed. The teenager hesitated, wrong-footed by her response. For real? You'd teach us? If you're serious about learning, Danny said with a slight nod. Not if you're looking for social media content. A murmur ran through the class, the night workers exchanging glances of confusion and dawning realization. Eliza's eyes widened as she mouthed, "The dragon?" to May, who nodded slowly in recognition. The tension gradually dissipated as the teenagers, mollified by Danny's offer, backed toward the door with mumbled agreements to maybe check out Thursday's class. When they were gone, silence descended on the room. It was Jerome who finally spoke. So, Olympic gold medalist, huh? That explains a few things. Nervous laughter rippled through the group. Danny's shoulders tensed, but she faced them directly. Yes, I competed internationally for several years. Her voice was steady, but Marcus could see the vulnerability beneath her composed exterior. I'm retired now. Retired? Eliza asked. But you're so young. Danny glanced at Marcus, a silent communication passing between them. He nodded slightly, encouraging. Sometimes, she said carefully, you need to step away from something to remember why you loved it in the first place. Is that why you've been hiding out teaching us? Shauna asked. I wasn't hiding, Danny replied, then smiled slightly. Well, maybe at first, but then it became something else. Her eyes met Marcus's again. Something more important. The simple honesty of her words seemed to resonate with the group. These were people who understood transformation, who had each come to this basement carrying their own fears and emerged stronger. Well, said Terrell with a grin, I guess now we can say we trained with the dragon. No, Danny said firmly. You trained with Danielle. The dragon was a persona for competitions. This, she gestured to the room, to all of them. This is real. The class resumed, but something had fundamentally changed. The secret was out, but instead of the awkwardness or celebrity treatment Danny had feared, there was a new level of trust. The night workers treated her discovery not as sensational news, but as another layer of connection, another shared confidence among people who had come to rely on one another. After class, as they put away the mats, Marcus found Danny staring thoughtfully at nothing. You okay? He asked quietly. She nodded slowly. It's strange. I've spent 3 years running from being the dragon, and now that people know, she shrugged. It doesn't feel like I expected. They still see me, not just the medals. Marcus took her hand, still surprised by how natural the gesture had become in the weeks since their first kiss. Because you let them see you, the real you. She leaned against him briefly, drawing strength from his solid presence. Reynolds called again yesterday, about the exhibition tournament. Marcus tensed slightly. And? I told him I'd think about it. She looked up at him. Not for the reasons he wants, not for the sponsors or the comeback narrative. Then why? Danny's expression grew thoughtful. Because maybe there's a way to be both, Danielle and the dragon. Maybe I don't have to choose. Marcus considered her words, understanding flowing between them. Like being both a wounded veteran and a self-defense instructor? She smiled. Exactly like that. As they finished cleaning up, Eliza approached them hesitantly. I just wanted to say, she paused, gathering her thoughts. 6 months ago, after the attack, I was afraid of everything. My own shadow. Coming here, learning from both of you, it saved me. Not just the techniques, but seeing how you both rebuilt yourselves after whatever happened to you. Her sincerity hung in the air between them, a gift neither had expected. Thank you, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. That means a lot. Eliza nodded, then added, a bunch of us are going to the diner after Thursday's class to celebrate Jerome's promotion. You both should come, if you want. After she left, Danny and Marcus stood in the quiet of the basement, the invitation settling between them like a bridge to something new. Community, Danny said softly, echoing Marcus's words from months ago. Purpose, self-respect, and something else, Marcus added, pulling her gently into his arms. Something we didn't plan for? Their kiss was interrupted by the janitor unlocking the door for his midnight rounds. They broke apart, laughing like teenagers caught after hours, and gathered their things. Outside, the spring night was cool and clear. They walked slowly, neither in a hurry to part. About the tournament, Marcus said finally, "Whatever you decide about being the dragon again, about what comes next, I'm with you." Danny stopped walking, turning to face him fully. What if what comes next isn't what either of us expected? What if it's something completely new? The streetlight illuminated half her face, leaving the other in shadow. Both sides equally beautiful to Marcus, equally true. "Then we figure it out together," he said simply. "One day at a time." She nodded, a smile spreading across her face that contained both vulnerability and strength. "I like the sound of that." As they continued walking, their hands found each other, fingers intertwining. Above them, the city sky revealed only the brightest stars, but they were enough to navigate by. Enough to guide two people who had lost their way back to a path neither had imagined, but both now chose. The exhibition tournament was held in the city's main sports arena, typically home to basketball games and concerts rather than martial arts competitions. But today, the space had been transformed. A raised platform in the center held the competition mat, surrounded by tiered seating filled with a surprisingly diverse crowd. Marcus sat in the front row, flanked by Eliza, Terrell, Shauna, and a dozen other night workers who had taken the day off to attend. None of them were typical martial arts fans, but they cheered with enthusiasm as Danny, the Dragon, was announced. She entered without the theatrical flourishes of the other competitors, her presence commanding attention through its quiet intensity rather than showmanship. Her eyes found Marcus's briefly before she stepped onto the mat, a small smile passing between them that contained months of shared understanding. What the crowd didn't know, what only Marcus and the night workers understood, was that this wasn't simply the Dragon's return to competition. It was Danielle Chen integrating the pieces of herself she had kept separate for so long. The exhibition match was against a rising star half her age, a young woman with impressive technical skills but without the depth of experience that made Danny's movements seem effortless. As they bowed to each other, Marcus could see the shift in Danny's demeanor. Not the cold calculation of her earlier competitive days, but a centered presence that acknowledged both the seriousness of the contest and its place in a larger context. The match began, and immediately the difference in their styles was apparent. The younger competitor attacked aggressively, her movements technically perfect, but telegraphed by small tells that Marcus had learned to recognize during their months of training together. Danny responded with an economy of movement that made her seem almost leisurely until the moment of explosive action. "She's holding back," Eliza murmured, leaning toward Marcus. "No," Marcus replied, his eyes never leaving the mat. "She's teaching." And she was. Each time the younger woman attacked, Danny responded in ways that allowed her opponent to recognize her mistake without humiliation. It wasn't about dominating, it was about demonstrating. When the final point was scored, Danny's victory decisive but not crushing, the two competitors bowed to each other with mutual respect. The crowd applauded enthusiastically, but the loudest cheers came from the unlikely group of night workers who had come to support not the Dragon, but their friend Danielle. Afterward, as the arena emptied and the competitors dispersed, Danny found Marcus waiting in the designated meeting area. She was still in her competition uniform, her hair damp from the shower. "You were amazing," he said simply. She smiled, the tension of the day finally releasing from her shoulders. It felt different, being out there again. Like I was bringing all of myself to the mat this time, not just the parts that win medals. Reynolds appeared behind her, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and calculation. "That was exactly what the sponsors wanted to see," he said, clapping his hands together. "The Dragon still undefeated. We've already got offers coming in for a full comeback tour. Europe, Asia, North America." Danny exchanged a glance with Marcus before turning to Reynolds. "I'm not interested in a tour." Reynolds' smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" "After today's performance, I'll consider select exhibitions." Danny continued calmly. "1 or 2 per month, on my terms. And I want half of any sponsorship revenue directed to community self-defense programs for vulnerable populations." Reynolds stared at her, processing the unexpected negotiation. "That's not how this works, Danielle. You've been out of the circuit too long to start making demands. Then I guess we're done here." She turned as if to leave. "Wait," Reynolds said quickly. "Maybe we can work something out. Limited appearances, some charitable component." "Not some charitable component," Danny corrected. 50% of all sponsorship revenue to community programs, and I choose which exhibitions I attend." The sports manager looked between Danny and Marcus, seeming to calculate the dynamics at play. "You've changed," he said finally. Danny nodded. "Yes, that's the point." After Reynolds left with a tentative agreement to consider her terms, Danny turned to Marcus with a mix of exhilaration and uncertainty. "Did I just make a huge mistake?" she asked, turning down a full comeback. Marcus took her hand, running his thumb over the calluses that spoke of both her competitive past and her present work. "I think you just found a way to be both Danielle and the dragon on your own terms. That's not a mistake. That's courage." She leaned into him, the public setting forgotten as she sought the comfort of his steadiness. "There's something else I've been thinking about. The community center basement, it's not big enough anymore. Not with the waiting list we have." Marcus nodded. The self-defense classes had grown exponentially since word had spread about the dragon's involvement. What had started as a small group of night workers had expanded to include teenagers from the surrounding neighborhoods, elderly residents concerned about safety, and others seeking not just physical techniques, but the sense of community that had evolved around the classes. "I was thinking," Danny continued, "with the exhibition fees and some of the sponsorship money, what if we opened our own space? A real dojo, but not just for competition training. Something different. Something that combines elite techniques with practical self-defense," Marcus said, catching her vision immediately. "Accessible to people who need it most." "Exactly." Her eyes lit with enthusiasm. "We could offer sliding scale fees, scholarships for those who can't afford classes, create something that doesn't exist yet." The future unfolded between them. Not the one either had imagined when they first met in that basement, but something better. Something built from the broken pieces of their former dreams, reassembled into a new pattern that honored both what they had lost and what they had found. "Partners?" Danny asked, extending her hand formally. Marcus took it, but instead of shaking, he pulled her close. "Partners." He agreed and sealed the promise with a kiss that spoke of endings and beginnings intertwined. Later that evening, the entire group, Marcus, Danny, and all the night workers who had become friends over months of shared practice, gathered at the diner where Jerome worked. They crowded into booths and pulled tables together, ordering breakfast foods despite the evening hour in honor of their nocturnal schedules. As conversation flowed around them, Eliza describing her first successful date since the attack, Terrell and Shauna debating names for their newly announced baby, May discussing her plans to train as a pharmacy manager, Marcus found himself watching Danny. She was laughing at something Jerome had said, her face open and unguarded in a way it never was in public appearances. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Just thinking," he said quietly. "About what?" He gestured to the group around them. "About how sometimes the things we think are endings turn out to be beginnings in disguise." Danny's expression softened. "Like a security guard with a bad knee teaching self-defense to night workers? Like an Olympic gold medalist hiding in plain sight," he countered with a smile. Their hands found each other under the table, fingers intertwining in what had become a familiar gesture of connection. Around them, their unlikely community continued its cheerful conversation. Night workers who had found belonging in a basement class, now planning futures brighter than they had dared to hope. And in the warm light of the all-night diner, two people who had once defined themselves by what they had lost discovered that what they had found, in each other, in purpose, in community, was worth far more than any medal or accolade. It wasn't the ending either had expected. It was better. It was real.